everybody, and welcome to this month's ConnectED4 Success episode. I'm Becky Hill, and today I'm super excited to be interviewing Leslie Strachan. Leslie is an award-winning coach and trainer who's been working in the education sector for over 30 years. She's a Canfield certified trainer in the Success Principles, a published author of academic papers in her field of business studies. She provides mentoring to students and is an advisor to teachers. To her list, she now adds a published author of her new book, which we're going to be exploring today, The Ultimate Guide for Parents, How to Help Your Kids Become Self-Confident, Happy and Passionate. So welcome, Leslie, to our show. Thank you for your time. I really appreciate you for giving up your Saturday morning to be with us. I know it's been a really busy time for you since you last launched your book. So I'm delighted to have you with us today and to give us a peek into the world of parenting children and building self-confidence.
Thank you for that great introduction, Becky. And it's a pleasure to be here with you today. So my background is in education and training. I've been doing that for over 30 years. I'm also a volunteer mentor and an enterprise advisor in schools and universities. And often what I'd say to the young people when I'm teaching them is, what do you want to do with your qualifications? What are you going to do after you've left college or university? And you know the usual thing with teenagers, you get, or I don't know, and you kind of get this sort of, I don't know. So at that point I thought, I wonder if I can help these people, because clearly, you know, going through life with no aims and objectives is not right for some people. So what I decided to do was use my training as a Jack Canfield coach in the Success Principles, and I started to do workshops within my classes. And we found that the results were truly amazing, and to see the light bulb go on in young people's eyes just really does that for me. It's a really exciting part of my working with young people. So after we started integrating it into the teaching, we then went on to develop that into a 10-week course. So that's kind of where I am at the moment, of course, along with the book.
Yeah, so the book's so that's given us a little bit of background into you and your that's really very brief journey of how you got to be writing to write your book. So let's expand a little bit further on it, because in the book I noticed that you've incorporated it's like 12 chapters.
Yeah.
Really easy, it's an easy read guide, but I've noticed that you've incorporated like a number of exercises, initially encouraging the parent basically who's reading it, to undertake those prior to doing that with their children. So tell us a little bit about the exercises and what's behind getting the parent to do it.
Yeah, that's a really good question, because I noticed a while back Jack Canfield wrote a book for teenagers about this very same thing. But the thing with them, the teenagers, is that they very often won't read and they won't do the exercises and they don't see the point. So I wondered whether there was a different way that we could help parents and careers advisors to help those young people. And the other point was, when I started interviewing parents about this, some of them didn't have a Scooby about really who they were or what they wanted to do either. So the book is kind of two books in a way. One, it helps parents work through the book to find out who they are and what they want. And then the idea is that they coach their young people to do the same thing. And the parallel journey has been quite interesting for some people, that what the parents want for the children, or rather the teenagers, aren't necessarily what the teenagers want. And for them to have a kind of a mutual understanding of each other helps build relationships as well.
So have you, so it's the 10-week course that you've developed, it's as a result of the book, is it?
It is, yeah. It is, because it was, of all the principles that we know as trainers, it's what do you put in easy, manageable, bite-sized chunks that can be picked up and used quickly and easily. And so the 10-week course is built on the back of the book. But on the top of that, we can add additional stuff into the into the course. And we had a pilot in July in Winchester, and that was just amazing to see these young people just literally change within 3 hours and go away with, you know, vision boards and stuff like that. The teenagers' responses was 100%. They absolutely loved what we did, which is quite unusual for teenagers. But on the basis of that pilot, we decided to run this 10-week course starting in September.
So what do you think really engaged them? What I have an idea. But what do you think really made the difference between them actually stopping to hear and to do versus putting the barriers and the blocks up, saying, no, I ain't doing that, I ain't interested?
Yeah. The 15 years that I've spent with university students gave me an inkling that if you engage them and we talk about you rather than us telling them what they should be doing, and the whole learning process is experiential, it's about doing, it's about being involved. And I think that was the key for them, that they enjoyed not being taught at, but being involved in their own development. And the whole program was about them and what they want and how they can achieve that and how they can take responsibility. The other thing that was really key for us was to get them to do stuff all the time. So we were doing exercises with them in terms of team building, we were doing group work, we were doing one-to-one interviewing each other. So the whole 3-hour program that we did with them was moving, getting up, doing this, doing that, but it was all about them and focused on them. And we weren't these sort of older adults saying, you should do this and you should do that. So I think that was the key for them, that they felt it was a safe space to express themselves and they were able to get things done that they wanted to think about.
Yeah, because I think it's quite, must be, well, I mean, you think about school, our education system and what the system is. The system's very much about sitting in a classroom and the teacher telling you about something.
Yeah.
So you're almost like conditioned to be that being talked at. That learning is about being talked at. That is something I found that carries through into adult life, interestingly. You know, when we do the training in the professional field and we provide training programs, quite often the concept is that, you know, it's a classroom training and you've got somebody who supposedly knows it all, which they never do. So stands up the front of the class and tells everybody what to do, and that they don't do anything. You know, they just sit and take notes. And then maybe they even have to take a little exam at the end of it, you know, because they have to say that they've got a certification over something. So, So it's quite interesting that
and that's pretty boring as an education concept that we, and I know we're going to talk about that later about exams and stuff like that, but you know, there's some really good models around. We've got the UTC College in Portsmouth who've completely turned education on its head, and they start with personal values and school values and employability skills. And they build a very bespoke curriculum where everyone's really engaged because they really want to be there. And I think the whole thing about our education system is just so wrong at the moment. We're not doing ourselves any favours. We're falling behind Europe and the world in terms of education. And no one wants to listen. I think it's astoundingly awful. But that's just my personal opinion.
No, but I think it's really interesting because it sort of links in, I think, with the next question that was like on my head. Because I don't know how many of our listeners are parents of teenagers or parents of younger children coming through the work, but you know, nationally, and we are talking in the UK, but I'm pretty sure the UK is a good reflection of what's going on in Western world. But nationally in the UK, there seems to have been a rise in mental ill health. And particularly amongst the young people. I mean, I know that there has always been a when statistics started to be measured, when data started to be taken and measured of suicide rates in young people, that seems to be reasonably constant, unfortunately, over the last 40 years. But in terms of the actual presenting of mental ill health and things like self-harm and those things, there's much greater awareness of that today, and that seems, the data is suggesting that that's on the rise.
Yeah.
Between our sort of age ranges of 5 to 18 years of age. So, what do you think might be some of the contributing factors to that, and how we can sort of do something to stem that increase?
Yeah, there has been a lot of scientific reports and loads of stuff in the news recently that the issues appear to lie in the strongly materialistic and competitive values, which lead to higher levels of mental stress. And when people feel buffeted by all these forces they have no control over, we'd argue perhaps that it's the person that needs correcting, because you can't influence external factors that are happening to you that are causing the problem. It's how you deal with it that's the issue, and whether you feel that you have control over it. And there's a long history of science analysing the relationship between subjective feelings and external circumstances. And there's always a tendency to see the feelings are more able to change rather than the external circumstances. Probably the focus on exams have a significant trigger for mental illness. Lots of schools, colleges, universities are moving away from portfolios now, back into exams. I don't really know how that's going to help young people learn anything. And they're under pressure all the time. It's the schools, colleges, universities, they have to have these pass rates, they have to have these percentages, because everyone's just sort of hell-bent on percentages and league tables, and the teenagers have now got the impression that they've only got one shot at tests that will determine the rest of their lives, and it's just simply not true. So that anxiety transmits itself to parents, and the responsibility for your parents' self-worth is actually quite a heavy burden for teenagers to take on board as well, that they don't feel good enough, so therefore the parents don't feel good enough. Certainly with university students, there are concerns over unemployment, so they stay in education just because they can't get a job. Right. Feelings of not being able to cope with life outside of the home, feel anxious, feeling overwhelmed, the list just goes on and on and on. But what bothers me the most are all these emotional feelings that they're trying to deal with, all these outside influences over which they have no control. But maybe again that needs to be sort of turned on its head. So why do we have to keep trying to cope with all these external influences like Facebook, like peer pressure and things like that? Can we not educate our young people to be who they are and to just move away from having to follow the flow of what everybody else is doing? It just seems like too much pressure on everybody to get all these percentages and grades, which is why one of my contentious chapters is called Grades Who Cares Anyway? And it's caused quite a flurry of they do. And I said, well, actually they don't for a lot of people. We can't all be university high-flying millionaire graduates, and a lot of people don't want to be. So
no, and I think it's quite interesting when you look at it today. I was interviewing a young chap, he's a personal trainer, and he's in his mid-20s, and he's got the right mindset. He's obviously, one of the reasons why I interviewed him was because I liked the whole approach that he was taking towards health and fitness, and how he was helping people with their mind and thinking about what they were doing. So very much along lines some of the exercises, in fact, that you've got in your book, translate across to the personal training, personal health, well-being and fitness sort of arena. And it was so interesting because he was saying how he'd come out of school and he had gone down got all these exams, gone off to university, and he absolutely hated it.
Yeah.
He hated it. He didn't want to be at university. It actually caused him a lot of anxiety, apparently. And then when he did get his degree, he then said, he came out and he said, so I got this degree because it was in sports psychology, sports and psychology. There aren't any jobs out there specifically for sports and psychology because it's a new degree. So I didn't actually have a job to go to.
No.
And so then I ended up doing sort of other jobs that weren't related to my degree. And this is like a common theme.
It is.
I am seeing in young people that they're going to get a degree. And I do wonder whether we have devalued degrees. Because I don't deny, I believe that there are some people who are definitely destined to be academic, and we need those academic minds because they're the ones that, ask the questions, do the research, do all of that. But there's equally, and of as equal importance, are the more practical people on the ground that actually have to translate this academic into practical. How do we make it work for us?
I can agree with that, and I can say this now that I don't work at a university. That 50% of everyone who was going should not have ever gone there.
Really?
No.
Wow.
There's just no. I think that a lot of students are forced into going to university because they can't find anything else to do. Right. And I think there's a great move now in some areas of making this link between education and employers, that employers are part of the skill development in younger people, and that they can pull people out of universities with their degrees into the workforce, rather than having the students leave with, got a 2-1, what do I do with it now? So this employer engagement to help students and to provide a free flow of skills into the workplace is really important, and some people are doing a great job on that, but there's still a wealth of work to be done there.
Yeah, it's quite interesting. I read a couple of books by Ken Robinson. Who's well known in education because what I really loved about it was when he was challenging the sort of, why are we spending so much time on the logical, what they call the STEM product, the STEM subjects, and not actually also balancing that with the humanities, where you've got all that creativity. So things like art and things like drama and things like geography and history, and that are some schools, in all fairness, some schools do major on them, but the majority of them, when they're talking about the PISA league tables and everything, they're looking more at English, maths, science and technology.
I know. And that's still the case. I was at a local enterprise meeting the other day, and everyone's still focused on STEM, completely focused on STEM. And we're not all STEM mindsets. So, does that devalue everything else that we do because we're not, in the groove of being a STEM student?
Yeah. Well, what's interesting is what you said earlier, picking up from what you said about our feelings, and the emotions that are going on in there. I think that focusing on the logical, focusing on STEM is quite logical, but I think it also is not helping people to connect with the emotional side of the human experience.
Yeah.
It's almost like, we're denying we're denying the fact that actually we're run on emotions. That they come first.
We are, and even in STEM-related areas like aerospace and engineering and places like that, you've still got to manage people and you've still got to work as a team.
Yeah.
So there are all these soft skills that underpin these really hard STEM skills that still need to be developed somewhere along the line, and that is of concern to me. And what better way to start
with helping young people connect up with what they want to do. So as I know that's what some of these exercises in your book are doing. I think you had I've gone off where we were, haven't I? But I did warn you that we would. But like chapter 1, you talk about taking 100% responsibility for your life. And can we come back to that? Because where this one's coming. And chapter 2, you actually say, do what you love, you know. And so, and that was about, you know, doing what you love and not getting caught up in the grades, what grade you're getting. And doing what you love is emotion. it's feeling, isn't it?
It is.
So you know, so how do we help people connect up? How do we help people discover what it is that they love?
Well, just taking a step back from that, which will lead on to doing what you love, is about the overarching principle that everyone's not entitled to a great life. You have to work for it, and you have to take responsibility for it, and you have to deal with it within the context of everything that's happening around you. And I just want to give you one example quickly of when I was under a severance scheme at university about 3 years ago, and I was boo-hooing and I was blaming and complaining and getting really emotionally tied up with this. And because I'd done this Canfield stuff, I thought, well, I have to take responsibility for this. And so I started to stop blaming and complaining and started thinking, well, what do I love to do? So I went back through all the work that I'd done before, and I thought, I'd love to be in front of people, I love to teach, I love to do this, I love to do that. So I thought, so how can I reframe my whole life into doing something that I really love to do? So I went through these exercises, so I found out the things I wanted to do, the things I wanted to have, and the things I wanted to be in life. And when you start putting that down on paper and actually discussing it, it can be quite easy things. I want to be happy, I want to be satisfied, and these are kind of all emotional things as well. And to sort of put all the external forces aside, doing what you love brings a sense of actual mental well-being and happiness and passion. So if you're doing what you really love to do, are you then going to be more likely to be satisfied and productive in the job that you're in, rather than I go to work because I have to earn money scenario? And money is important for a lot of people, but if you can marry the two together, wouldn't that be great? So with the young people that we're working with, we go through, who do you want to be? What do you want to have? What do you love to do? And then bring all these things over a series about 7 weeks. We bring all these things together, and they do these things, these vision boards that you can see behind me, and they do that across their whole life. So it's about their personal life, about their mental health, about their fitness, about what sort of job they want, what sort of money they want, places they want to visit. Do they want a home or a car? Do they not want any of those things? And then create a plan to make it happen. So in their minds already, we're reconditioning them to move towards what they want in easy bite-sized things. It's a bit like a big jigsaw, and you don't have to do the jigsaw all in one day. You can do a little bit of a jigsaw, feel really great and happy that you've done it, and then move on. You know, not all of us want to go to university, not all of us want to be millionaires, not all of us want a full-time job. I don't know. I've gone back to being self-employed. So it's about helping young people just be the best person that they can and who they want to be. So that's talking about what you love and not getting caught up in the grades, and catching these people early on in their teenage years and having these defined visions and purposes in life helps them there. And I've been mentoring a 15-year-old recently, and she said, my mum wants me to do that, that and the other. But based on the work that you've done with me, we're now changing our subject choices so that I'm still coming out with a good degree or a good college qualification, but it's in subjects that I love, things that I enjoy, things that I'm going to do well at because I'm going to apply myself and be focused and really work hard and study for. And then, you know, those things, I've already started thinking about work experience in those fields that I really love to do. So is it about the grades, or is it about having people focused on what they love to do, which will eventually lead to better grades? So that's kind of where I'm coming from in the book.
I think it's such a good thing that you've it's so great to hear that you know you've had that impact on that 15-year-old, because I think that there is so much evidence now that actually demonstrates that the mind at that age is so malleable, and that's the time at which to help people tune into doing the thing that they love. Otherwise, it like creates this dynamic inside them, which is they're out of sync, isn't it? And then they go forward, and that's when you get unhappy adults.
Yes.
But so it's great that she then felt empowered to be able to go back to her mum and you know, discuss changing the grades. I mean, that is just such an amazing piece of work.
Yeah. And the other pieces of work we did at uni was a similar sort of thing. We came out with these vision boards, and then we had a come as you are party.
Oh, cool.
In 2026, and they all came dressed up. And one guy who was a photographer came along as the new David Attenborough, because at that point, you know, poor David might not be with us, you know, in sort of 10, 20 years time. But he was the new, you know, life, what do they call David Attenborough? Whatever he's called, sort of naturalist, you know, taking photographs. Yeah. He came along with his pretend wife and his pretend children, and told me where he lived and who he was working with and what projects for the BBC he was on. And he was kind of alive and vibrant. And, you know, 3 months before, he'd been crying in my office because he didn't want to be at uni studying a master's degree. And that transition was just amazing. And if it
is quite interesting, isn't it? Because I noticed the difference between, and we were just having a conversation before we got online about primary school, that there's some work going on in primary school around helping the young people with mindfulness and some tools and techniques for that. But I've just come out of the secondary school with the approach with my son, and now we're transitioning into college, and it's really quite marked difference, the approach in college to secondary school, what everybody describes as pastoral care, you know, the mentoring, the you know, the choice of empowering them and giving them a bit more responsibility to turn up to the classes, and being a bit more aware to some degree of the additional support that has to go in the background, other than just the subject matter support. And it seems quite different. It seems quite a lot more focus on the whole person at college, versus coming out of secondary school. It was just all about the grades. And so if you were brilliant, you know, if you were a high level student, you had all the attention paid on you. If you were a student who had learning difficulties, you had attention paid for you. But if you were that tranche that were in the middle, well, okay. And they were sort of like just forgotten, really. And I just think, oh my God, why couldn't we done some of this work that you've been talking about now, you know, and actually helping kids to tune in to, you know, what they really enjoy doing.
You see, kids are very clever.
Yeah.
And when they're 6, 7 and 8, when they're really malleable, a lot of them have an idea about what they want to do. When you sit with them in a circle and go, what do you want to be when you grow up? It'll be a fireman, a school teacher, a nurse. I want to be an environmentalist. I want to do this. I want to do that. And they know. And as the years progress, they get it knocked out of them by the system or by parents or by a combination of the two. So when we dampen down that sort of passion and that love early on, I see at the other end with master's students and level 6 students who are third year students, a complete disarray of who they are and what they want to do, because they've been through this mangle of people telling them what they should and shouldn't do.
Yeah.
And my view is that you could catch them earlier and sort of seed those ideas and help them move forward to see how the education system is going to help them. Would that not be better? But it's not happening. There are small pockets of it, but essentially we're in a system whereby you have to do that, and that, and you have to do those grades, otherwise you're considered useless.
See, and that's interesting, because I was going to say to you, as a former teacher, where do you think the education system can improve? And its support and its development of the young. So do you want to expand on that a little bit more?
Yeah. Because of my work with the Careers and Enterprise Company and EBP South, we are finding little pockets, like I mentioned the UTC College in Portsmouth, where this is happening. And they've had to, this is a completely new college which started at the ground up. And the headmaster himself has said there have been issues trying to do this, but they start with school values and personal values. They start with employability skills. They start talking about teamwork, decision-making, leadership, really very early on. They work with businesses a lot to bring them in, but also to co-deliver some subjects. And for that to be turned around, and then there's this narrow-ish set of subjects that the students teach because they are interested in engineering or interested in aerospace or whatever, or in computing and stuff like that. So instead of putting everybody through the same mill through secondary school, and I know some schools are trying to sort of define themselves into STEM and creative, I'm still getting the feeling that we're not dealing with the whole young person and who they want to be and what they want to have, and encouraging some creativity in their brains to explore this for themselves. Yes, it might change as they get older, but having looked at both systems, I'm totally in love with this new idea of starting off with the soft skills and starting off with me and what I want, and then building the curriculum around that, rather than offering the curriculum that might include all sorts of subjects that are totally irrelevant to a future life. I just don't get, I think there's too wide a choice for a lot of people because they don't know what to do. They're kind of forced into choosing things that aren't right for them. And I think that's where our education system could develop and improve over a period of time. So yeah, there are stars out there.
Yeah, well, I noticed in when I was reading Ken Robinson's book, there's a same sort of thing over in America, because he obviously did a great tranche of work here in the UK because he's a Brit.
Right. Yeah.
He did massive work in the UK, working with the Department of Education, didn't he? And then
he did, yeah.
And then he moved over to Los Angeles or somewhere, but he moved over there, and then he started doing an awful lot of work over there with their education system. And it's the same sort of thing. There's a few bright stars out there who are challenging the status quo. They're challenging the norm, and they're saying, hang on a minute, it doesn't have to be like that. Let's recognise, we're all human. That's what joins us together, is the fact that we're human.
Yeah.
We're all human, but we're all individuals with on a journey of our own self-discovery, aren't we?
Yeah.
And funny enough, I think one of the questions that I had was that there's a lot of parents, and there's probably quite a lot of teachers as well, who would be saying, yeah, this is all okay in principle, but how I'm an adult, I'm already responsible because I think most adults would think that they were responsible. I'm already an adult. I'm already responsible. You know, how can a young person possibly know what they want? How can they need me to tell them to you know, I've got to tell them what to do. I've got to push them down this route because they don't know. They don't know what they don't know, sort of thing. And I what would you say to them?
I'd say that we need to look at, there's an interesting article actually in The Independent recently about how to change the way we parent young children these days, because as the generations have gone on, I don't know about you, but I just did what my mother told me and that was the end of the story. There was no argument, no nothing. And so these articles that are coming out now are more about supporting and inspiring your young people and talking them through these situations that they find themselves in, rather than dictating to them what they should or shouldn't do. But it's quite interesting when you talk to head teachers, because I spend quite a lot of time with them, that they seem to have to be responsible for their kids as if they were their own children. And I'm not going to say they blame the parents, but there is a parental responsibility for doing half the stuff, like turning up on time for school, like turning up with clean clothes at school, like making sure their mobile phones are turned off before they enter the school gates, just to make sure that they've done their homework. You know, it's not the teachers, schools, colleges and universities to make sure that happens. It is the individual person, but the parents are responsible and they have to. It's quite interesting that you would say, when you said earlier that they would say they're responsible, and I would say currently actually they're not.
Yeah. And
they need to take on more responsibility. And we were talking earlier about if you were to take 5% more responsibility, what would you do? Turn up to school on time, make sure they're clean and tidy, make sure they've got their packed lunch, make sure they've done their homework. And for parents to support the teachers more, it's not their responsibility to bring your kids up. It's the parents.
What's quite interesting is that there's actually a triangle of care.
Yes.
And I think we're caught in a dynamic of legal responsibility. We're legally responsible for our young people up until they're 18.
Yeah.
But they are legally responsible from 16 to be able to make a choice to go off and go and do what they want to do. They can go and they can start, obviously, you know, all the activities that we try to avoid them from doing before their 16 days, they will have pretty much done it. Those that are definitely pushing the envelope.
Yeah. And
depending, of course, on the parenting style. There's no manual, and this is one of the conversations that I was having the other day with someone, is that there isn't a manual for parenting. No. So if you're a parent for the first time, so I, for example, only have one child, so my child was the first experience of parenting, and I think quite often there's this illusion that we have as adults. You know, we have this picture in our mind of what the perfect child is, and you know how they're going to be perfect child, and then of course your child isn't how you imagine them to be. No. And but you still are trying to treat them like they are, rather than parent the person that you've got.
Yeah.
And I found it quite I think I'm really, you know, that it's really interesting that you talk about this new college down in Portsmouth, you know, that have tuned in so early on to personal values and school values, because one of the things that I discovered through my experience as a parent is my values were not clear. So I think this is something else that we see going on in. There's a difference between here's our home life and here's our work life. And in work, we're very much sort of focused around goals, performance and all that sort of stuff. And that's what's happened in school. Goals of hitting exams and doing all that sort of stuff. So we're in the professional life, as I would call it, work, business, professional life, it's knowing where we're going and having that goal, that target, those performance indicators is a system, and that's what we've got to do. Yeah. But we don't often translate that into our family life. I mean, I know some people will be much better than will have got it because they've had a bigger family or they've learned by now. But I know certainly, I don't know very many families that have a very clear understanding of what their values are as individuals, as the team family, and then from that have had a dialogue in the conversation about what does it mean when we set boundaries? What does it mean with behaviours, and what does it mean with our belief systems? And that's been quite an interesting thing, because I know from my own experience, my as soon as my son hit his teenage bit, and whilst I can talk to a load of parents and say, oh yeah, that's what happens, loads of parents will say the same thing. But what it did for me is it made me stop and go, actually, what am I having a problem with here? I'm knocking up against something. I don't like it, but I haven't been very clear about what the boundary is. And I think one of the things that happens, and so I learned my boundaries, and I learned then to explain where my boundary had been overstepped. And then that was really empowering, because it meant that when I came up something, I'd say no. And it wasn't, I didn't feel, you know how sometimes parents feel, oh, I can't say no to my beloved little child, you know. It's like, oh no, well, they're just young and they're just going to, it's like, no, this is like a no, it's not acceptable because this is blah, blah, blah. And it's quite interesting how that then makes you, I call it empowered parenting, really. Then you start to take responsibility and recognise that because you haven't been clear on your boundaries, that's why the kids are doing what the kids doing.
And also the boundaries change, so they'll make a decision 1 minute and then change it, or the other parent will, so there's no consistency.
And that happens in school though. That happens when I see that so I find it, I smile when you said that it's that the head teachers will say it's the parents, because I've had that experience as well, where I was a parent who was trying to actually engage the teachers to talk to me, because I could see something was going to occur on the horizon. So I wanted some help in the background to manage it. And the initial barrier was, oh, well, that's your problem, it's your fault, you should do it. And it was like, hang on a minute, I understand that I've created this, but I'm now standing in front of you saying I need your help, and the way you're managing it in school isn't helping, because you're not having a dialogue with me when you make that decision, and you're not having a dialogue with my boy, who is then doing exactly what he wants to do because you're doing what he's expecting you to do.
But then, I was in a school the other week, and I shan't say what one it was. The headmistress was in the room, and I was dealing with some low-level disruptive students, and this dialogue that was going on about who's responsible for learning in the classroom, who's responsible for learning, who's responsible for writing stuff down, who's responsible for not throwing things across the classroom. And then the students would blame the teachers and say they were rubbish teachers. And I was going, this isn't what this conversation is about, who's good, who's bad, who's blame. It all comes back to the responsibility. So if you didn't do that, or that, would you be able to learn more? And they said, yes. I said, fantastic. So what action points are you going to do this afternoon in class to make that better? And then you have to tackle the teaching element separately. But there's all this sort of blaming and complaining somebody else still from these teenagers, when if they were quiet and if they wrote stuff down and if they went to the teacher to ask for additional support or help, like go to BBC Bite Size or something, would that not help their learning? And yes, they can see that, but there's just too much tension going on all the time, and then they've got all this stuff happening around them in teenage years. It's a very difficult place to be.
Oh yeah, I don't think I would want to go back to my teenage years.
No.
And I don't think I would want to go back to my teenage. I think the teenagers today, because of technology, because they're I don't know in your day, but in our day, we didn't have all of this social media. We didn't have all of this, 24/7, in our brain. We went out, we went and played, we came back. This was bedtime. We went to bed. We slept. Or maybe we read under the covers. But we didn't play video games, and we didn't have, distracting mobile phones going on. And all of those things that parents have had to learn about all of those things.
They have, but for me, working with young people and social media and all that stuff that you've talked about, is that young people have a choice.
Yes, yeah, but they don't know it unless we teach them
exactly
how to make that choice, which is what your book's all about.
Yeah,
isn't it? That's what your book's all about. Your book's all about helping people to young people and the parents to make a conscious choice. It's a great thing. So I think we're actually we're coming to the end of our time. But I'd just like to ask before we sort of go, there's what would be the 3 key points that you'd like people to take away from our call today?
I think I'd like to, for the parents of teenagers and careers advisors, I'd like you to take away some idea that you do have choices, you do have some control, you can make a difference to your own life so that you can help your young people. You can use a lot of the stuff that we've talked about today, not to dictate to young people, but to inspire and support. We were talking about a different type of parenting for young children today, so that you can inspire and support them to make the right choices, or to make choices that you're both comfortable with. And for everybody, absolutely everybody, to take 100% responsibility for everything that comes your way. No blaming, no complaining. And if you can't do it by yourself, then come and do our 10-week workshop in Winchester.
Yeah, that would be great. Leslie, put up your book again. Let's just make sure that everybody home it in onto the home it in. That's it. There you go. So I want everybody to see. So the ultimate guide for parents. And I've read it, and it's not just a book of words. It's a book of story. It's a book of exercises. So it's a practical book, as well as a book that gives you some context as to what inspired Leslie to put that together. So
there's about 28 different exercises in here, so it could take you a year or two.
It's one of those things, isn't it? You can either do it little by little, or you can take a time and go through each. It depends on what's right for you. But your 10-week workshop obviously is that's based on your exercises in the book. So and quite often being in the room, that gives support, inspiration, and also helps you move forward a little bit quicker.
And having the energy, like you say, with other like-minded people. It's very practical, it's hands-on, we're doing stuff all the time. We're not going to dictate with death by PowerPoint.
No.
So from the minute you walk in the room, it's sort of, let's get on with this. And you sat up, you sat down, you're meeting people and forming networks of other like-minded positive people moving forward. And that's the idea for the workshops.
Yeah, it's brilliant. Well, that's all we have time for right now. And I'd really like to express my gratitude and appreciation once again to you, Leslie. Thank you very much for sharing your ideas and your insight, and for having our little chat. If anyone would actually like to know more about you or ask further questions, where can they go?
They can go to my website, which is lesliestrachanconsultingandtraining.com. We've got our Facebook group going on, so just look up Leslie Strachan Consulting and Training. We've got a LinkedIn group as well. We've got an Instagram account, or you can email me at leslie@lesliestrachan.co.uk. And we've also got a YouTube channel where you can go and see lots of videos and interviews and exercises that you can do. So whatever you'd like to do, we've got a a channel for you to go and have a look at.
Brilliant, and I'll be putting those links up at the end of this video, so you'll be able to grab those and have a look there. And also, don't forget, you can go on Amazon and go and buy Leslie's book. Is that right?
Yes, sorry, I forgot to mention that.
You're also at a book fair next week, aren't you?
I am. I'm at the Hursley Park Book Fair, which is sort of between Romsey and Winchester. So I'll be there on Sunday the 24th of June if you want to pop in. Right,
so you can pop in down there, or you, like you say, you can go on Amazon and go and find Leslie's book. But what I'll do is at the end of this, I'll put up an end slide which will have all of the details on there, so you'll be able to go there, and that'll be fabulous. And I highly recommend that you do get Leslie's book, because like I say, it's not like some of these other books out there that are so thick and cumbersome and it takes you ages to go through them. This book is something you can actually dip into. You don't need to really go into start at the beginning chapter and go all the way to the end. You could just dip into certain sections if you want to, whatever one sort of appeals to you at that time. So it's always a good thing to do. So I'd also like to just remind everybody that you can get a transcript of this interview if you'd rather read what we've been chatting about today. So you just go to my website, which is www.solutions-42.co.uk/connected. That's where this interview will be posted. And underneath the interview, there's a request box for the transcript. So just click on that box, and you'll then I'll get the email to say you want a transcript of it, and I'll get that sorted for you. And if you'd also like a notification of further interviews, then you can sign up on that page as well. So that'd be great to see you. So thanks to everyone. Thanks to Leslie again, and thanks all for listening. And remember, let's get connected for success. See you soon.
Bye.